In 1944, German crews climbed into what they thought were the safest tanks on the battlefield, the feared Panther. Thick armor, deadly gun, a rolling fortress of steel. But then, on one front, something changed. A new shell appeared. Panthers that once shrugged off hits suddenly went silent and burned. What was this impossible round? Who created it? And how did it turn Germany's elite tank into nothing more than a flaming metal coffin? Stay with me, because once you understand what this shell did, you'll never look at WWII tank battles the same way again. By the final years of World War II, the European battlefield had transformed into a vast landscape of shattered towns, burned-out vehicles, and frozen fields littered with the remnants of exhausted armies. Among this devastation, one machine consistently stood out: the German Panther tank. Its sharply angled armor, long-barreled cannon, and intimidating silhouette made it instantly recognizable to Allied troops, who often felt a chill down their spine each time they spotted one emerging from the tree line or cresting a hill. The Panther was not merely another tank, it was a symbol of Germany's mechanical precision and battlefield dominance. When the Panther first appeared during the battles of 1943, it caused immediate concern among Soviet commanders. Its armor was sloped so effectively that shells that struck the front often ricocheted harmlessly away, and its high-velocity gun destroyed T-34s at distances where Soviet crews struggled to return fire with any meaningful effect. Even with early mechanical problems, the Panther's raw combat performance overshadowed its flaws. Every army that faced it, Soviet, American, British, Canadian, quickly understood that this tank demanded respect. Many crews felt that engaging a Panther head-on was a gamble often lost before the first shot was fired. But as winter settled over Europe in late 1944, rumors began to circulate that something had changed. Panthers that should have survived multiple impacts were being knocked out with startling efficiency. Mechanics inspecting the wrecks found clean penetrations through armor that had previously been considered nearly untouchable. Some Panther crews reported that they never even saw the incoming shell before their tank erupted in smoke and flame. These accounts, initially dismissed as isolated anomalies, soon became too frequent to ignore. Something new, something powerful was striking the battlefield. This sudden vulnerability came at a critical moment for Germany. Fuel shortages, relentless Allied bombing, and the collapse of multiple fronts had already placed enormous strain on German armored divisions. Even so, many crews maintained confidence in their machines. The Panther's armor, especially its formidable glacis plate, had saved countless lives and allowed crews to hold ground even under intense pressure. But now that confidence was shaken. Reports from both the Western and Eastern fronts described Panthers burning after single hits to the front, something previously considered nearly impossible. To understand why this development mattered so profoundly, one must consider the psychological landscape of tank warfare. A crew's belief in their armor is not just a technical detail, it is a foundation of their survival instincts. Panther crews had spent years trusting that their tank could withstand most Allied weapons. The moment that faith cracked, their effectiveness on the battlefield weakened as well. Commanders sensed this shift as more Panther crews became hesitant to advance into uncertain terrain, reluctant to expose themselves to long-range duels, and increasingly aware that their armor was no longer a guarantee of safety. Meanwhile, Allied units had quietly begun fielding improved anti-tank ammunition, developed through years of metallurgical research and battlefield experience. These new shells did not rely solely on explosive power. Instead, they harnessed kinetic energy, dense core materials, and high velocity to pierce heavy armor with startling precision. Unlike experimental prototypes, these rounds were reliable, repeatable, and ready for widespread distribution. They didn't just challenge German armor, they redefined the rules of tank combat entirely. Before this new shell revealed its full impact, the Panther still reigned as one of the most feared vehicles of the war. Its long-range accuracy, deadly punch, and intimidating appearance allowed it to dominate open terrain battles. Allied tank crews often described the horror of seeing a Panther's turret turn in their direction because they knew that if the Panther fired first, the engagement would likely end in flames. Despite this, the Panther's weaknesses, its unreliable mechanical systems, vulnerable side armor, and immense fuel consumption, were well known. Yet none of these flaws prepared crews for what was about to hit them. The first documented encounter involving the mysterious shell took place in a small Belgian village during the snowy days of December 1944. The town, half destroyed by artillery and frozen by winter winds, had become a temporary strongpoint held by Allied infantry. A Panther unit advanced confidently toward the outskirts, its tracks grinding over broken stone and ice. The German crews expected little resistance. They believed the Allied forces ahead would scatter at the sight of their tanks, as had happened so often before. Hidden behind a battered stone wall, an American anti-tank crew waited anxiously with their gun positioned to cover the road. They had been issued a new type of ammunition just days before, but no one had explained what made it special. The men had trained for months, but training never fully erased the fear of facing a Panther head-on. As the German tank emerged through the haze of smoke and snow, the gunner steadied his breathing and aligned the sights on the only spot he believed might give them a chance, the center of the glacis plate. When the gunner pulled the trigger, the recoil nearly knocked him backward, but he kept his eyes on the target. What happened next stunned everyone. Instead of bouncing off as expected, the shell punched straight through the Panther's armor, disappearing into the hull before a burst of flame illuminated the inside of the turret. The tank shuddered, stopped, and began burning almost immediately. The smoke poured out thick and black, rising into the winter sky as the crew inside struggled in vain. For a moment, the American crew didn't move. They stared at the burning Panther, unsure if what they had just witnessed was real or some strange stroke of luck. They had faced Panthers before, and every time, the battle had felt like a hopeless contest. But this time, the tank that had terrified countless Allied soldiers had fallen with a single clean hit to the strongest part of its armor. The gunner asked if he had misjudged the angle, but the commander insisted the shot had been direct. The crew exchanged glances of disbelief, exhilaration, and unease. None of them understood the technology behind the new shell. They only understood its result. Word of the incident spread rapidly through nearby infantry and armored units. Communication lines carried the story from one platoon to another, from one battalion to the next. Some dismissed it as an exaggeration or a lucky fluke, but others took the report seriously. Panther tanks were not supposed to fall like that. Even inexperienced soldiers knew how resilient the Panther's frontal armor had been in previous battles. The fact that a single hit had ignited one so quickly was enough to raise eyebrows, spark whispers, and plant seeds of curiosity among Allied crews eager for any edge. On the German side, the loss of this Panther was initially dismissed as an unfortunate but explainable occurrence. The crew might have been careless, the hit might have struck at an unusual angle, or perhaps the ammunition inside detonated prematurely. German commanders had seen plenty of tanks burn from internal fires caused by mechanical issues or misfortune. Yet as more encounters occurred in the days that followed, each alarmingly similar in circumstance, it became clear that this was not an isolated event. Something new was piercing the armor that many crews had considered nearly invincible. Back in German maintenance depots, engineers began examining the wrecks. What they discovered caused immediate concern. The penetrations were clean and circular, indicating enormous kinetic energy rather than high explosive fragmentation. The point of entry was not limited to weak spots like the sides or rear. It was the frontal armor, the very area German designers had counted on to give their crews a fighting chance. The glacis plate, crafted with such precision and sloped specifically to deflect incoming rounds, had not protected the tank. It had been pierced as though it were much thinner steel. German intelligence officers began collecting battlefield reports, trying to determine what kind of weapon could produce such results. Rumors spread among German tank crews that the Allies had developed a new miracle shell, though no one knew how it worked. Some speculated it was a shape-charged design, others believed it used exotic materials, and a few insisted it must be fired from a new type of gun altogether. The uncertainty amplified the fear. In war, the unknown is often more terrifying than the known threats, and Panther crews were beginning to feel that their advantage was slipping away. Meanwhile, Allied ordnance specialists were increasingly confident in the performance of their improved ammunition. For years, they had studied captured German armor, adjusted core materials, redesigned penetrators, and refined manufacturing techniques. These new rounds were the culmination of scientific effort driven by necessity. The Panther had forced them to evolve, and now the results of that evolution were manifesting on the battlefield. The American crew from the Belgian village wasn't the only one seeing surprising results. Similar successes were being reported in other sectors, signaling that the improved shells were no longer experimental. They were effective tools of war. One of the most revealing engagements took place near the Vistula River, where Soviet anti-tank crews had endured years of brutal fighting against German armor. When a Panther appeared on the snowy ridge overlooking their position, the Soviet gunners prepared for a familiar and painful struggle. But instead of bouncing off or chipping harmlessly at the Panther's angled armor, their new ammunition penetrated with startling ease. The resulting fire consumed the turret within seconds. The Soviet commander later remarked that it felt as if the armor had lost its strength, though he suspected the truth lay in the power of the shell rather than the weakness of the tank. As more Panthers burned across multiple fronts, the German High Command demanded urgent reports. What troubled them most wasn't just the number of losses, but how these tanks were being destroyed. The Panther was one of Germany's most valuable armored assets, expensive to build, complicated to maintain, and difficult to replace due to material shortages. Every destroyed Panther represented a significant strategic setback, and now they were being lost at a rate that defied previous battlefield expectations. Morale among German crews began to falter. Veteran tankers who once felt a sense of security behind the Panthers' armor now found themselves hesitating in situations where they previously would have acted boldly. Confidence is as much a weapon as any gun, and the sudden doubt spreading through German ranks created a psychological shift the Allies quickly recognized. Crews who fear their machine is failing them are slower to advance, more cautious in engagements, and more prone to retreat in uncertain conditions. For Allied forces, this shift was a welcome relief. Panther tanks had long been the bane of Allied armored units, particularly in open fields where the Panther's deadly accuracy could dominate from a distance. Now, however, with improved ammunition and growing confidence in their anti-tank capabilities, Allied crews began facing Panthers with renewed determination. They no longer viewed every frontal engagement as suicidal. Instead, they began studying new strategies that leveraged their enhanced firepower. Nevertheless, Allied soldiers still respected the Panther. Even with more effective shells, the tank remained dangerous. It could still knock out most Allied vehicles before they reached optimal firing distance. But the knowledge that the Panther could be penetrated from the front, even if not always reliably, transformed the battlefield dynamic. It meant that Allied tank destroyers, anti-tank guns, and even certain tank models now had a chance to challenge the Panther in ways that had not been possible before. In early January 1945, during a series of engagements near the Ardennes, the impact of the new shell became even more evident. Multiple Panther units that attempted counterattacks found themselves under fire from well-positioned Allied guns equipped with the upgraded ammunition. Several Panthers were disabled or destroyed before they could even return fire. The terrifying image of a Panther burning from a frontal hit began to spread among both Allied and German lines. The battlefield had shifted, and commanders on both sides could feel it. German field reports from this period offer a rare insight into the growing anxiety among tank crews. One report described a Panther commander who refused to engage Allied forces until the fog lifted. fearing that any unseen enemy gun could knock out his tank from ranges previously considered safe. Another report mentioned a unit that chose to remain behind cover longer than their orders allowed, hoping to avoid exposing their frontal armor to weapons they could not yet fully identify. These accounts reveal not only tactical hesitation, but psychological disruption. This shift in battlefield behavior did not go unnoticed by Allied strategists. They recognized that German armored units were becoming increasingly defensive in posture, and they adjusted their operations accordingly. More aggressive flanking maneuvers, more direct confrontations, and more deliberate attempts to force Panther crews into open engagements became common. With the improved shell now circulating across multiple Allied divisions, commanders felt emboldened to challenge German armor with strategies that previously would have resulted in disaster. As the improved shells continued to demonstrate their effectiveness, Allied intelligence officers began compiling data to analyze penetration results, effective ranges, and the conditions under which the shells performed best. Reports detailed the exact locations of Panther penetrations, the angles involved, and the approximate distances. This information provided valuable insight into how the ammunition could be used most effectively, enabling field commanders to plan their engagements with greater precision. At the same time, German engineers began to suspect that the improved shells might rely on a combination of high-velocity impact and a core, material harder than anything the Panther's armor had been designed to withstand. Some speculated the Allies were experimenting with exotic metals or hardened composite alloys. Others believed that improved manufacturing processes had given the shells greater structural integrity upon impact. Whatever the explanation, the results were undeniable. The improved ammunition was not only effective, it was transforming the battlefield. Crews who once feared engaging Panthers now felt empowered. Entire divisions began requesting more of the shells, eager to replicate the successes reported by neighboring units. This demand revealed how deeply the weapon had influenced Allied morale. The psychological effect of knowing that the Panther could be destroyed, even from the front, was profound. On the German side, desperation grew. Commanders issued orders instructing Panther crews to rely more heavily on ambush tactics, using terrain to their advantage and avoiding direct frontal engagements whenever possible. They were encouraged to strike from forest edges, destroy bridges behind them, and reposition frequently to avoid being targeted by Allied anti-tank guns equipped with the new ammunition. However, these tactics offered only temporary relief, as the Allies continued to press forward with overwhelming numbers and improved firepower. One particularly revealing engagement took place near a small crossroads village in northern France, where a German armored unit attempted to halt an American advance. Panthers lined up behind hedgerows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But before the German tanks could fire a single round, Allied gunners opened fire from concealed positions. Several Panthers were hit directly in the front and erupted into flames. The Germans retreated in disarray, shocked at how quickly their line had collapsed. This battle became a clear demonstration that the improved shells were not a fluke, they were a turning point. The psychological impact of these losses continued to deepen. For years, the Panther's reputation had been built on its ability to survive head-on engagements that would have destroyed lesser tanks. Now that reputation was being dismantled, not by overwhelming numbers, but by a single piece of technology engineered to do one thing: penetrate armor previously considered impenetrable. German crews felt as though they were walking into battle without the protection they once relied on. Even German propaganda, which typically portrayed their armored forces as unstoppable, found it increasingly difficult to maintain the illusion of superiority. Reports from the front contradicted the optimistic tone of official broadcasts. Panther crews soon learned through first-hand experience that their tanks no longer dominated the battlefield as they once had. Whispered conversations in bunkers and staging areas reflected growing uncertainty, frustration, and fear. The myth of the Panther's invulnerability was quickly unraveling. Allied crews, however, remained cautious. They knew that despite the new shell's effectiveness, a skilled Panther crew could still inflict devastating losses. The tank's cannon remained among the most lethal of the war, capable of knocking out Allied vehicles from remarkable distances. Because of this, Allied gunners were trained to fire quickly, aim carefully, and reposition immediately after firing. They understood that success depended not only on improved ammunition, but also on discipline, coordination, and precise execution. In many battles, the improved shell did not guarantee a kill on the first shot. Some Panthers withstood initial impacts and continued fighting, especially at longer ranges. However, the mere possibility of frontal penetration was enough to shift battlefield strategies. Allied commanders now pushed their units to engage Panthers more aggressively, knowing that their chances of succeeding were significantly higher than they had been months earlier. As the winter of 1944 turned into early 1945, the cumulative effect of the improved shells began to manifest more clearly. German armored divisions were increasingly forced into defensive roles, unable to launch the kind of armored spearhead assaults that had characterized earlier stages of the war. The battlefield initiative had shifted decisively to the Allies. With every burned-out Panther hull left on the roadside, the Allies gained not only a tactical victory, but also a psychological one. German efforts to counter the new threat were hampered by worsening industrial conditions. Bombing raids disrupted steel production, transportation systems, and ammunition factories. Engineers proposed plans for thicker armor plating, composite layering, or redesigned frontal configurations. But almost none of these ideas could be implemented quickly enough to matter. Germany simply lacked the time and resources to respond effectively to the improved shell. In the midst of this strategic decline, German tank crews did what they could. Some angled their tanks more aggressively, hoping to deflect incoming rounds. Others used smokescreens, hit-and-run tactics, or the cover of night to avoid direct confrontations. But these strategies could not fully compensate for the fundamental shift in battlefield capability. The improved shell had tilted the balance, and no amount of skill or bravery could reverse that alone. Even high-ranking German officers began acknowledging the severity of the situation. Reports reached Berlin detailing the increasing number of Panthers destroyed by frontal penetrations. These reports often included sketches, impact analyses, and detailed accounts from surviving crew members. Each report revealed the same troubling truth: the Panthers' armor advantage was gone. On the Allied side, ordnance specialists continued refining their ammunition designs, seeking even greater penetration and consistency. The improved shell was not the final evolution of Allied anti-tank weaponry, it was merely a major milestone. Research teams pressed forward, examining captured German armor to understand how their weapons could perform even better. Each discovery contributed to a growing sense that the technological race was shifting definitively in the Allies' favor. For Panther crews who had survived earlier stages of the war, this period was demoralizing. Many had entered 1944 with confidence in their equipment, trusting that their tanks could withstand most threats. Now, in early 1945, they found themselves facing weapons they barely understood, shells that seemed to ignore the Panthers' carefully engineered defenses. Veteran crews who had once felt invincible now felt exposed and vulnerable with every kilometer they advanced. The experience of facing the improved shell left a lasting mark on those who survived the engagements. Some recalled how suddenly their tanks were hit, how quickly fires spread through the interior, and how little time they had to react. The chaotic seconds after a penetration smoke filling the turret, ammunition igniting, the engine seizing were seared into their memories. These experiences heightened the sense of dread that accompanied each new mission. Meanwhile, Allied infantry units, which had long struggled against German armor, welcomed the improved performance of their anti-tank guns. For years, infantrymen had relied on tactics that required enormous courage, getting dangerously close to enemy tanks, using explosives, or trying to aim at vulnerable spots. With the arrival of the improved shell, infantry units felt a renewed sense of control. Their anti-tank guns felt more capable, more reliable, and more worthy of the enormous risks they faced daily. In some sectors, the improved shells were so effective that commanders believed they could change the pace of offensive operations. If the Panther could be neutralized more easily, armored thrusts could move faster, breaking through defensive lines that had previously been held with stubborn resistance. This optimism fueled a wave of confidence that permeated Allied ranks. The battlefield was not the only place where the impact of the improved shell was felt. Rear area workshops that analyzed destroyed Panthers provided invaluable data. Metallurgists and engineers compared penetration patterns, studied fragmentation effects, and noted how the shell behaved against different armor angles. This research helped refine Allied tactics further, ensuring that future engagements would be even more effective. In contrast, German repair crews found themselves overwhelmed by the number of Panther wrecks that could not be salvaged. Tanks destroyed by the improved shell often suffered catastrophic internal damage, making them impossible to repair quickly. Even when salvage crews attempted to recover the hulls, fuel shortages and transportation problems made the process painfully slow. With each unsalvageable wreck, Germany's armored strength dwindled. As retreating German units moved through towns and forests, they frequently passed by burned-out Panthers that served as grim reminders of the changing nature of the war. These hulks, still smoldering in some cases, were symbols not of German engineering triumph, but of the Allies' evolving ability to counter even the most advanced German machines. Soldiers marching past these wrecks felt a growing sense of unease, knowing that if the mighty Panther could be destroyed so easily, their chances of success were diminishing rapidly. Within Allied ranks, commanders began using the improved ammunition as a focal point for new tactical doctrines. Training sessions emphasized how to identify Panther positions, calculate optimal engagement ranges, and coordinate multiple anti-tank assets to overwhelm armored thrusts. The improved shell was no longer a novelty, it was becoming standard practice, shaping how battles were fought and won. The improved shell not only affected how the Allies fought, but also influenced how they perceived the remainder of the war. Many believed that with the ability to neutralize Panthers, the war's final phase would be faster and less costly. While this belief did not account for the sheer complexity of the remaining battles, it nonetheless provided a crucial morale boost at a time when many soldiers were exhausted from years of conflict. On the German side, the situation grew increasingly dire. Commanders attempted to concentrate their remaining Panthers in defensive strongholds, hoping that careful deployment would minimize losses. However, the improved shell rendered even these strongholds vulnerable. Panthers positioned behind fortifications or hull down remained susceptible to well-placed shots, particularly from elevated or flanking positions. No defensive posture could fully eliminate the threat. During one critical engagement in the early months of 1945, German forces attempted to form a defensive barrier using a line of Panther tanks positioned along the edge of a wooded area. The intention was to halt an advancing Allied armored column. But as soon as the column arrived within firing range, Allied gunners unleashed a devastating barrage of improved shells. Several Panthers were penetrated within minutes, causing explosions that rippled through the line and forced the remaining tanks to withdraw. What could have been a prolonged standoff became a swift Allied victory. These repeated encounters demonstrated that the Panthers' era of dominance was ending. The improved shell had neutralized its greatest strength, its armor, and without that advantage, the Panther was simply another tank in a war filled with increasingly powerful weapons. Even the tank's formidable gun could not compensate for the loss of its defensive superiority. As February 1945 approached, German armored divisions found themselves in a state of near-constant retreat. The improved shell had fundamentally changed the calculus of battle. Crews no longer entered combat, believing they could rely on their armor to save them. Instead, they approached each engagement with a level of caution that further hindered their effectiveness. In warfare, confidence can be the difference between victory and defeat, and German confidence had been badly shaken. The improved shells were now widely distributed across Allied units, ensuring that almost any engagement involving Panther tanks could potentially end in disaster for the Germans. This widespread availability meant that German tank commanders had to assume that every Allied gun they faced might be equipped with the new ammunition. This assumption created pressure, hesitation, and a sense of unpredictability that made coordinated maneuvers difficult to execute. Meanwhile, the physical terrain of the battlefield played a role in amplifying the shell's impact. In many war-torn regions, open fields, cratered roads, and burned-out buildings created natural choke points that funneled German tanks into predictable paths. Allied gunners, anticipating these movements, positioned their guns at angles that maximized the improved shell's penetration capabilities. The combination of terrain and technology created lethal opportunities that punished Panther units repeatedly. Allied tank crews also adjusted their tactics to take advantage of the improved ammunition. Instead of avoiding frontal engagements with Panthers, they began initiating them under favorable conditions. They used cover, long-distance observation, and coordinated fire to ensure that the first shot was theirs, and often the last needed. The confidence instilled by the new shell allowed Allied forces to challenge German armor more boldly than at any previous point in the war. German commanders, recognizing the worsening situation, attempted to conserve their remaining Panthers by limiting their involvement in direct combat. Some were assigned to support roles, while others were held in reserve for potential counterattacks. But no matter where the Panthers were deployed, they remained vulnerable to the improved shell. Even reserve units found themselves targeted during transport or repositioning operations. As Allied offensives gained momentum, the improved shell's influence grew even more pronounced. Each successful penetration became a data point that reinforced the Allies' strategic advantage. The accumulation of these small tactical victories contributed to the broader collapse of German defenses. When added to the already dire shortages of fuel, manpower, and supplies, the improved shell became one of many factors accelerating the war's conclusion. By March 1945, the once feared Panther had lost much of its psychological power. Allied troops, who had once regarded the tank with dread, now viewed it as a challenge they could overcome. This shift in perception was not merely symbolic, it had real tactical consequences. Soldiers who believed they had a fighting chance were more aggressive, more coordinated, and more motivated to engage the enemy. In contrast, surviving German Panther crews felt increasingly trapped. Many described a sense of helplessness, knowing that no matter how skillfully they maneuvered or how carefully they positioned their tanks, they could still be destroyed by a single well-placed hit. This fear eroded the composure and discipline that had once characterized Germany's armored forces. Even elite units struggled to maintain cohesion under such pressure. The battlefield stories of burning Panthers, visible even from miles away, circulated among troops on both sides. For Allied soldiers, these burning hulks were symbols of progress and proof that the improved shell was making a difference. For German soldiers, they were haunting reminders of a shifting war they were increasingly unable to control. Each burned-out wreck told a story of evolving technology, shifting momentum, and the gradual decline of a war machine that had once dominated the battlefield. By the end of the winter of 1944-1945, it was clear to historians, commanders, and soldiers alike that the arrival of the improved shell marked a pivotal moment in the war's final phase. The Panther tank, once a symbol of German battlefield superiority, had been humbled by a single technological innovation that turned its greatest strength into a vulnerability. Part 1 ends at this turning point, the moment when the foundation of Germany's armored confidence began to crumble, setting the stage for the dramatic confrontations that would come next. As the war dragged into its final chaotic months, commanders on both sides understood that the clashes between German Panthers and Allied anti-tank units were becoming defining encounters that symbolized the broader collapse of German military momentum. The improved shell was no longer a mysterious rumor whispered among frontline troops. It had become a confirmed and documented threat that demanded tactical adjustments. Panther crews were now instructed to avoid long, open approaches where Allied guns could track them. Yet circumstances often forced them into precisely the kind of vulnerable situations they wanted to avoid. Terrain, weather, and the overwhelming pressure of Allied offensives left German tankers with few options but to face hazards head-on, even if doing so meant risking a sudden and catastrophic hit from the deadly new ammunition. In sectors across the Western Front, the Allies began coordinating assaults with an awareness that their improved shells had fundamentally changed the risk profile of German armor. Anti-tank gun crews no longer needed to wait for perfect angles or flank opportunities. Instead, they positioned their weapons to deliver the first accurate frontal shot, confident that the destructive potential of their ammunition could compensate for any slight imperfections in aim. This newfound confidence caused commanders to place guns in more daring positions, on open slopes, behind low-rise walls, and even atop ridgelines where their fields of fire were broadest. The battlefield began to favor those willing to seize initiative rather than those relying on static defenses. In early February 1945, a particularly dramatic confrontation unfolded near a ridge overlooking a small valley west of Cologne. German forces, attempting to delay an Allied advance, deployed several Panthers along the ridge in what they believed was a strong defensive posture. The elevation offered excellent firing angles and a commanding view of the valley below, where the Allies were expected to appear. But Allied reconnaissance units identified the German positions early, allowing American anti-tank crews to set up hidden firing points in the woodland at the valley's edge. The resulting engagement demonstrated not only the potency of the improved shell, but also the extent to which the Allies had learned to integrate the ammunition into their wider battlefield planning. When the first Panther opened fire, its long-barrel 75mm gun echoed across the valley, sending a high-velocity round toward the American armored units approaching the tree line. The shot narrowly missed, slamming into a ruined farmhouse behind them. The Americans held their ground, waiting for their designated gunner to find the right moment. As the Panther adjusted its aim for a second shot, the Allied crew fired their improved shell from a partially concealed position. The shell flew across the open space, struck the Panther's front armor, and penetrated with startling ease. Flames erupted instantly, visible even from the opposite slope. The other Panthers attempted to return fire, but the Americans had already repositioned, firing additional shots that crippled 2 more tanks within minutes. Surviving German crew members later described the engagement as one of the most demoralizing experiences of the war. They had believed their elevated position and defensive posture would give them the advantage. Instead, they were targeted with devastating precision. The improved shells turned what should have been a stronghold into a trap. Their attempts to retreat were hampered by the narrow paths behind the ridge, and several tanks were lost not to enemy fire but to collisions or mechanical failures as crews tried desperately to escape. This battle became a clear example of how the Allies had transitioned from being reactive victims of German armor dominance to proactive destroyers of it. On the Eastern Front, the story unfolded with equal intensity. Soviet forces advancing toward Germany encountered increasingly desperate German armored units attempting to hold river crossings, forested choke points, and fortified urban positions. The Panther, once a terror in the early years of the war, struggled to maintain effectiveness under the relentless Soviet push. The Soviets, like the Americans and British, had begun fielding improved armor-piercing ammunition of their own. Although not identical in design, these rounds produced similar battlefield results, particularly when fired from upgraded anti-tank guns positioned to ambush German vehicles from unexpected angles. One memorable incident occurred outside the ruined city of Kostrin, where the Soviets were determined to break through German lines and open the path to Berlin. A German armored counterattack attempted to relieve pressure on infantry units defending a key bridge. The Panthers advanced cautiously through streets lined with debris and collapsed buildings. Soviet anti-tank guns, hidden among the rubble, waited patiently. As the Panthers approached the intersection at the center of the district, the Soviet commander gave the order to fire. The improved shells tore into the first Panther, penetrating the glacis plate and igniting the fuel line almost instantly. The second and third tanks suffered similar fates before they could respond. The German counterattack collapsed within minutes, allowing Soviet forces to press deeper into the city. The speed with which these engagements unfolded shocked German commanders. They had built their armored strategies around the expectation that their tanks could endure at least several incoming shots before being decisively damaged. The improved shells denied them this luxury. Battles that once involved careful maneuvering and prolonged firefights now ended with brutal efficiency. The Allies could eliminate Panthers before the tanks even had a chance to identify the threat. This rapid shift in power dynamics created a sense of inevitability within German armored divisions, an understanding that their greatest asset had been compromised beyond repair. Despite these setbacks, German crews continued adapting. They experimented with positioning tanks in hull-down configurations, burying the lower hull behind earthworks to expose only the turret. They reinforced makeshift defensive positions with logs, stones, and debris in hopes of disrupting incoming rounds. Some units even applied additional plating or welded spare track links to vulnerable areas. But none of these improvisations reliably stopped the improved shell. The high velocity and dense core material allowed it to punch through added layers of metal and reinforced positions. German improvisation, though creative and often courageous, simply could not outpace Allied technological momentum. As the improved shells gained an almost legendary reputation among Allied troops, stories of incredible penetrations circulated widely. Some tailies exaggerated the shell's capabilities, claiming they could pierce multiple tanks in a row or travel through thick concrete without slowing. While these stories were embellished, they reflected the growing belief that the new ammunition had become a decisive element of the war. Soldiers who trusted their weapons fought more confidently, and this confidence radiated through the ranks, strengthening morale and reinforcing the conviction that victory was not only possible but approaching. German intelligence eventually confirmed that the improved shell was not a single type of ammunition, but rather a family of upgraded designs issued across multiple Allied armies. Each variant had been developed independently, shaped by national manufacturing capabilities and metallurgical expertise. Whether British, American, or Soviet, these shells shared one common purpose: to neutralize German armor. What German engineers found most troubling was that the Allied ammunition did not appear to have a single weak point. It performed consistently across different ranges, angles, and battlefield environments. This versatility made it difficult for German crews to devise effective countermeasures. The improved shell also revealed the limitations of the Panther's design philosophy. While its sloped frontal armor had been a brilliant innovation, it could not protect against weapons that relied on raw penetration power rather than ricochet-dependent trajectories. The Panther had been engineered during a time when armor thickness and slope were primary determinants of survivability. The improved shells introduced a new era of anti-tank warfare, in which velocity and material density could defeat even the most carefully angled plates. In response to these developments, Allied tank destroyer units became increasingly aggressive. Vehicles like the American M10, M18 Hellcat, and M36 Jackson were deployed more confidently into positions where they could challenge Panther assaults head-on. Their crews understood that their mobility, combined with the improved ammunition, gave them a decisive advantage. These units executed daring hit-and-run tactics, using their speed to outmaneuver Panthers and their firepower to destroy them. The battlefield, once dominated by German heavy armor, now rewarded the agility and coordination of Allied tank destroyer formations. One powerful illustration of this shift took place during an engagement near the Rhine in March. 1945. A German armored column attempted to establish a defensive perimeter around a strategic village. The Panthers rolled through the streets, positioning themselves to block the Allied advance. American tank destroyer units, approaching from multiple directions, used scouts and forward observers to identify the best firing positions. Once the Panthers were sighted, the coordinated attack began. Improved shells ripped into the German tanks from multiple angles, and within a short time, the entire defensive line had collapsed. The battle, which might have lasted hours in earlier phases of the war, concluded in less than 20 minutes. These rapid collapses alarmed German commanders, who had underestimated the extent to which the improved shells would transform Allied capabilities. The German army had traditionally relied on the superiority of its armored vehicles to compensate for numerical inferiority. But as the war shifted decisively in favor of the Allies, German tanks could no longer serve as the equalizing force they once had been. Instead, they became targets' high-value assets that the Allies now possessed the means to neutralize efficiently. The psychological toll on German crews continued to intensify. In letters recovered from soldiers' belongings, many tankers expressed fear that their next mission might be their last. They described nightmares in which their tanks ignited without warning, visions of incoming shells that punched through steel as though it were paper, and constant dread of unseen anti-tank guns hidden among the trees or behind ruined buildings. These personal accounts reveal the human dimension of the technological shift. War, after all, is fought not only with machines, but with the minds of the people operating them. On the Allied side, the improved shells bolstered unit cohesion. Crews who once doubted their chances against German armor now trusted their equipment and their training. This sense of trust improved cooperation between infantry, armor, artillery, and reconnaissance units. Combined arms operations became smoother and more decisive, allowing the Allies to exploit breakthroughs and encircle German positions with increasing efficiency. The improved shell was not just a tactical advantage, it was a catalyst for broader operational success. The Allies also invested heavily in intelligence gathering to understand the full impact of the improved shells. After every significant tank engagement, teams were sent to inspect the wrecks and collect data. They recorded penetration patterns, assessed the structural integrity of the armor, and documented the angles of impact. This information informed ongoing ammunition improvements and allowed commanders to refine tactics based on empirical evidence. It also provided valuable feedback to ammunition manufacturers, ensuring that production quality remained consistent across large-scale output. German engineers, overwhelmed by the speed of Allied advances and the scarcity of resources, attempted to propose emergency armor upgrades. Some designs involved additional steel plates, while others explored the use of spaced armor to disrupt the trajectory of the improved shells. However, these proposals rarely moved beyond the prototype stage. Germany's factories were in ruins, its supply chains collapsing, and its workforce depleted. The once innovative German war machine had lost its capacity to respond to technological challenges in real time. Even when small-scale armor modifications were implemented at the unit level, they proved insufficient. The improved shells were simply too powerful, capable of defeating improvised defenses as easily as they defeated factory-manufactured armor. German tank crews quickly realized that the battlefield had changed in ways that no amount of welding or field engineering could fully address. Their tanks might still be mechanically capable and strategically significant, but they were no longer the invulnerable beasts they once believed them to be. Throughout the early months of 1945, the Panthers' battlefield presence became increasingly symbolic of the broader German struggle. Each burned-out hull represented not just the loss of a weapon, but the erosion of German confidence. Allied soldiers frequently remarked on how many Panther wrecks they encountered during their advances. These hulks littered roadsides, fields, and urban ruins, their charred remains serving as stark reminders of the shifting balance of power. In several battles, German commanders were forced to abandon damaged Panthers rather than attempt repairs or recovery. The logistical strain of towing or fixing tanks under constant pressure from Allied offensives made salvage operations nearly impossible. Instead, crews destroyed sensitive equipment, set charges to prevent capture, and withdrew with whatever forces remained. The loss of these vehicles further weakened German armored strength and compounded the challenges facing frontline units. As German defenses continued to collapse, the improved shell became a symbol of inevitability. Allied propaganda units occasionally exploited images of destroyed Panthers to highlight the effectiveness of Allied weaponry and boost morale. Although these images were often simplified interpretations of battlefield realities, they nevertheless resonated with soldiers who had witnessed firsthand the destructive power of the new ammunition. The psychological impact of these images extended even to the home front, where Allied citizens gained greater confidence in the eventual outcome of the war. For Panther crews, the improved shells introduced a level of unpredictability that was deeply unsettling. In earlier stages of the war, crews could rely on detailed knowledge of enemy weapons and understand what their armor could and could not withstand. But now, even experienced commanders found themselves facing unknown threats. They no longer knew from which angle or at what range the next devastating hit might come. This uncertainty undermined their decision-making and reduced their effectiveness in combat, contributing to a downward spiral of hesitation and fear. In one documented case, a Panther unit deployed near the outskirts of Bremen attempted to establish a defensive line along a narrow ridge. The commander, aware of the improved Allied ammunition, ordered his tanks to spread out and position themselves behind natural cover. However, when the engagement began, Allied gunners using the improved shells delivered highly accurate shots from concealed positions. Several Panthers were knocked out within minutes, and the surviving tanks were forced to withdraw before reinforcements could arrive. This battle reinforced the growing belief among German crews that no terrain advantage could compensate for the destructive power of the improved ammunition. Meanwhile, Allied tank crews continued refining their engagement strategies. They practiced coordinated fire drills, learned to identify the most likely Panther approach routes, and studied the nuances of Panther armor layouts. With each battle, they gained a deeper understanding of how to position their vehicles and weapons for maximum effectiveness. The improved shell enhanced their capabilities, but it was their growing tactical expertise that transformed these capabilities into decisive battlefield victories. Beyond the tactical level, the improved shell had strategic implications that extended far beyond individual engagements. It allowed the Allies to maintain momentum during their rapid advances into German territory. The ability to neutralize Panthers quickly and efficiently meant that armored thrusts faced fewer delays, enabling Allied forces to exploit breakthroughs and surround German units before they could regroup. This accelerated pace of advance played a crucial role in the collapse of German defensive lines across the Western Front. On the Eastern Front, the Soviets leveraged their improved ammunition to devastating effect during their push toward Berlin. The Panther, once a feared opponent, now found itself unable to stop the sheer weight of Soviet offensives. Soviet commanders, buoyed by the performance of their upgraded anti-tank weapons, pressed forward relentlessly. The Panthers' diminished survivability contributed to the rapid fall of key strongholds and further weakened Germany's ability to mount effective armored counterattacks. German Panther crews often reflected on the bewildering speed at which the battlefield had changed. In letters, diaries, and post-war interviews, they described their shock at how quickly the improved shells nullified years of German engineering innovation. Some expressed admiration for the technological advancements of their opponents, while others lamented the limitations of their own equipment. These accounts provide invaluable insight into the human experience behind the armored clashes of 1944 and 1945. Allied troops who encountered Panther wrecks frequently remark on the precision of the penetration marks. Many were surprised by how cleanly the improved shells punched through the armor. leaving circular holes that resembled cuts rather than impacts. This precision contributed to the growing sense that the improved shell represented not merely a technological advancement, but a paradigm shift in anti-tank warfare. Soldiers who once feared German armor now approached battlefields with a newfound sense of technological superiority. As the Allies advanced deeper into Germany, the frequency of engagements involving Panthers declined simply because there were fewer Panthers left to fight. Mechanical failures, fuel shortages, and overwhelming numbers of Allied forces made it increasingly difficult for German commanders to deploy their tanks effectively. Nevertheless, the improved shell continued to play a significant role in the battles that did occur, ensuring that any remaining Panther units could not regain the upper hand. In the final months leading to Germany's surrender, the Panther's symbolic decline mirrored the broader collapse of German military power. The tank that had once epitomized German battlefield dominance now appeared as a relic of an earlier phase of the war, a machine outpaced by rapidly evolving Allied technology. The improved shell had exposed the vulnerabilities of the Panther's design and demonstrated the inevitable consequences of technological stagnation compounded by industrial collapse. Part 2 concludes at a critical point in the narrative, the moment when the improved shell's tactical, psychological, and strategic effects have become fully visible across both the Western and Eastern fronts. German crews now faced a reality in which their once dominant tank could no longer guarantee their survival, and Allied forces wielded new confidence as they advanced toward Germany's heartland. The battlefield had shifted irreversibly, and the stage was set for the climactic confrontations that would determine the final fate of the Panther and its crews. As the spring of 1945 approached, the collapse of Germany's armored confidence reached its breaking point. The Panther, once seen as the embodiment of battlefield dominance, now represented a desperate hope that rarely survived first contact with the enemy. Nowhere was this shift more evident than in the battles leading toward the Ruhr, where German commanders hastily assembled armored units in an attempt to slow the overwhelming Allied advance. These units included some of the last remaining Panthers, many dragged from repair yards or reassembled from cannibalized parts. Their crews knew the dangers ahead. Stories of Panthers destroyed by single frontal hits had spread far and wide, but they also knew they had no choice. This would be a fight for survival, one last attempt to halt a tide that had become unstoppable. In early April, one German armored battalion received orders to establish a defensive perimeter near a strategic road network that led into the heart of the Ruhr industrial region. The battlefield was littered with debris, scorched trees, and the charred hulks of vehicles destroyed in previous engagements. Allied reconnaissance aircraft circled overhead, signaling that the enemy was drawing near. Nevertheless, the German crews positioned their Panthers along a shallow ridge, hoping to use the high ground to their advantage. They believed that if they could hold this position long enough, infantry reinforcements might arrive to stabilize the front. But what they did not know was that the Allied units approaching them were equipped with the improved shells rounds that had already shattered the myth of the Panther's invulnerability. The engagement began with distant Thunder Allied artillery shelling German staging areas behind the ridge. As explosions rippled through the landscape, American tank destroyer units maneuvered into flanking positions, guided by forward observers who had identified the Panther's silhouettes along the ridge. The German crews watched the horizon with growing tension, scanning for movement. When the first shapes appeared, dark, fast-moving figures emerging from the tree line, the Germans opened fire. Their high-velocity rounds streaked across the battlefield, tearing into the earth around the advancing Allied units. But the Americans did not slow down. They were waiting for the moment they needed most, a clear line of fire. When the moment arrived, it came with devastating precision. An American M36 Jackson, positioned behind a half-collapsed stone wall, fired the first improved shell of the confrontation. The round traveled straight toward the nearest Panther, striking the glacis plate and punching through the armor as though it were made of thin sheet metal. Flames erupted instantly from the tank's interior, engulfing the turret in a pillar of smoke. German crews watched in disbelief. They had expected to trade shots, reposition, and endure multiple impacts, but instead, their comrade's tank vanished in a single violent moment. The ridge, once a symbol of defensive confidence, had become a place of dread. The surviving Panthers attempted to pivot, scanning for the source of the deadly fire. But the Americans had executed their maneuver with precision. Multiple tank destroyers fired in near-synchronized bursts, sending improved shells streaking across the battlefield. Another Panther took a direct hit to its turret ring, igniting ammunition stored inside. A third tank, attempting to withdraw behind cover, was struck in the lower glacis area, a notoriously vulnerable spot now made all the more lethal by the improved shell's penetrating capabilities. Within minutes, 3 Panthers were ablaze, their smoke rising like dark beacons above the ridge. German crewmen later described the terror and confusion of those moments. Some recalled the sound the improved shell made when it struck a sharp, metallic crack, followed by a roar of fire. Others remembered the feeling of helplessness, trapped inside their tanks with no idea where the enemy shots were coming from. In earlier battles, Panther crews had relied on their armor to buy them time to assess threats and return fire. Now they had seconds at best. The improved shell removed the margin of survival that had once defined armored warfare. It turned every frontal hit into a gamble that the Germans almost always lost. The Panther battalion commander attempted to coordinate a counterattack, ordering his remaining tanks to fall back to a secondary position deeper along the ridge. But the terrain worked against them. As the Panthers reversed, their silhouettes became clear targets for the American gunners. More improved shells flew across the valley, each finding its mark with chilling consistency. Another Panther erupted in flames, its crew scrambling to escape before the fire consumed the turret interior. Those who did escape ran across the ridge, their eyes stinging from smoke and disbelief etched on their faces. The psychological effect of watching their tanks fall so quickly was devastating. This battle marked a dramatic turning point, not only for this particular German unit, but for the broader perception of the Panthers' capabilities. The engagement demonstrated beyond any doubt that the improved shells had eliminated the Panthers' once dominant advantage. Even when positioned on high ground, even when firing first, even when following sound tactical doctrine, the Panthers could not withstand the improved ammunition. The battlefield no longer cared about German engineering brilliance, armor angling theories, or the weaponry that had once terrified Allied forces. The improved shells cut through these factors with brutal simplicity. They worked. As the ridge collapsed into chaos, the German infantry supporting the Panthers found themselves suddenly exposed. The burning tanks had served as markers, indicating exactly where the defensive line had failed. Allied troops surged forward, using the smoking hulls as cover. Machine gun teams, mortar squads, and advancing riflemen exploited the chaos, forcing the Germans to retreat in disarray. The entire defensive position crumbled in under 30 minutes, far faster than German commanders had ever anticipated. What should have been a prolonged attrition-based defense became a rapid collapse triggered by a single technological factor. Meanwhile, similar stories were unfolding on the Eastern Front. In Silesia, a Panther company tasked with covering the retreat of German infantry found itself facing the Soviet anti-tank brigade equipped with new armor-piercing rounds. These rounds, although different in design from the American versions, had been engineered with similar principles in mind: high velocity, dense cores, and maximum structural integrity. When the Panthers attempted to delay the Soviet advance by taking firing positions along a railroad embankment, the Soviets opened fire with devastating accuracy. The first Panther hit erupted in flames, and within moments, the embankment became a graveyard of burning steel. The turning point of this Eastern Front engagement came when a Soviet crew, firing from a concealed dugout, managed to penetrate a Panther's frontal plate at an angle previously believed impossible. The impact stunned German observers. They had positioned the tank with deliberate angling to maximize armor effectiveness, yet the improved shell punched through with ease. This was the moment when German officers realized that no amount of tactical expertise could compensate for the technological disadvantage they now faced. The Panther's advantage, its meticulously engineered armor, had been decisively neutralized. Panic rippled through the German tank line as more Panthers ignited. Those not destroyed outright attempted to withdraw, but they were targeted during their retreat. The improved shells did not discriminate between stationary and moving targets. They struck with the same lethal consistency. The German infantry units relying on the Panthers for support suddenly found themselves without armored protection. Soviet forces advanced rapidly, using the disruption to encircle German positions and capture hundreds of soldiers who had been rendered defenseless by the collapse of their armored screen. In both East and West, the psychological climax of the Panthers' downfall occurred not in high-level meetings or strategic headquarters, but inside the cramped, suffocating interiors of the tanks themselves. For the crews, the moments before impact were filled with tension, uncertainty, and an acute awareness that their survival depended on armor that no longer held meaning. The improved shells robbed Panther crews of the split-second window of reaction they once enjoyed. The first hit was usually the last, leaving crews with little time to coordinate responses or return fire. One German crewman later reflected that he and his comrades had begun recognizing the improved shell, not by sight, but by the way it affected their tank. He described a deep, violent jolt, followed by the immediate scent of burning insulation and engine oil, a sensory combination he associated with disaster. The shell did not necessarily create large explosions upon impact. Instead, it generated enough internal destruction to ignite fuel lines, ammunition storage, or electrical systems. In many cases, the crew never fully understood what had happened until they were scrambling out of the turret, gasping for breath as flames filled the interior. The climax of the Panther's downfall reached its most dramatic expression during the battles along the Elbe River, where remaining German armored units made final, desperate attempts to prevent Allied crossings. Defensive lines were arranged hastily, with Panthers positioned at choke points. These crews were some of the most experienced, still-alive veterans who had survived earlier phases of the war and knew how to place their tanks for maximum effect. But even their expertise could not alter the course of events. When the Americans opened fire, their improved shells sliced through the defensive line with horrifying efficiency. The first Panther destroyed along the Elbe did not simply ignite. It detonated with such force that debris rained across the riverbank. Allied observers speculated that the improved shell had struck ammunition stored beneath the turret ring, causing a chain reaction that split the tank apart. This spectacle shocked even the Allies, who had not expected such an extreme effect. The German crews, already shaken by previous engagements, now faced the ultimate nightmare: the possibility that their tank could be obliterated instantly, leaving them no time to react. With each Panther destroyed, German resistance weakened. The psychological turning point had been reached. The crews no longer believed in their armor, and without that belief, their tactics collapsed. Tanks attempted to flee rather than fight, exposing their weaker side and rear armor to Allied fire. Crews abandoned vehicles prematurely, fearing internal detonations. The once disciplined coordination of German armored units degraded into chaos. This psychological collapse was the true climax, the moment when the Panthers' defeat became inevitable, not because of battlefield losses alone, but because the crews no longer trusted the machine beneath them. In the weeks following the catastrophic battles along the Elbe, the full weight of the Panthers' downfall became unmistakable. German armored units, once the backbone of counteroffensive strategy, now found themselves reduced to scattered fragments of their former power. Commanders who had previously relied on the Panthers' durability now struggled to formulate plans that accounted for its sudden vulnerability. This forced a shift toward defensive tactics rooted in delay rather than destruction. The German High Command understood that tank engagements were no longer opportunities for decisive action, but rather desperate attempts to buy time for infantry to fall back, time for civilians to evacuate, and time for political leaders to consider the impossible decisions ahead. Across the front lines, the sight of burning Panthers became an unfortunately common occurrence. Their blackened shells dotted hillsides, riverbanks, and village edges like grim monuments of a collapsing war effort. Soldiers on foot passed these wrecks with a mixture of resignation and exhaustion. Many of them had once viewed the Panther as a symbol of protection, a machine that could stand between them and overwhelming Allied firepower. Yet now those same machines lay silent, their turrets twisted by internal explosions, and their once imposing frames sagging under the weight of defeat. This visual reality had a profound effect on the morale of German infantry, who increasingly felt abandoned by the armored forces that had once provided reassurance. On the Allied side, the psychological shift was just as dramatic, though in the opposite direction. Troops who had once dreaded the appearance of a Panther now approached armored engagements with a confidence that would have seemed unthinkable a year earlier. The improved shell had given them not only a tactical advantage, but an emotional one. They no longer saw German armor as an unstoppable menace, but as a challenge they were capable of meeting head-on. This change influenced battlefield behavior in subtle ways. Units advanced more quickly, coordinated more daring flanking movements, and engaged enemy strongpoints with less hesitation. The knowledge that the Panther could fall with a single well-placed shot altered the entire tempo of operations. The aftermath was not solely defined by the physical destruction of Panther tanks. It also manifested in the shift in priorities of Allied strategic planning. With the Panther threat reduced, Allied commanders were free to allocate anti-tank assets more flexibly. Units that had once been tied to defensive positions in anticipation of German armored breakthroughs could now be redeployed to support offensive operations. Anti-tank guns were moved forward to reinforce artillery bombardments. Tank destroyers were reassigned to spearheading columns, and infantry formations advanced with fewer constraints. This reallocation of resources further accelerated Allied progress into German territory, tightening the pressure on all remaining defensive lines. German armored doctrine, once celebrated for its emphasis on speed, coordination, and decisive strikes, now found itself unraveling. The improved shells had stripped the Panther of its ability to spearhead attacks or stabilize collapsing sectors. Without armored superiority, the fundamental structure of German battlefield planning began to collapse. Infantry units accustomed to relying on Panthers for fire support now faced overwhelming Allied pressure without that backing. Artillery, starved of ammunition and vulnerable to air attacks, could not compensate. As a result, German defensive lines often fractured quickly once the Panthers were destroyed, leading to rapid tactical breakdowns that further deepened the chaos of retreat. The aftermath also revealed the logistical consequences of the Panthers' defeat. German recovery teams, already strained by fuel shortages and Allied air superiority, found themselves unable to salvage most damaged tanks. The improved shells left Panther hulls deformed, burned out, or structurally compromised. Even tanks that had suffered seemingly minor damage often proved impossible to tow or repair because of destroyed transmissions, ruptured fuel lines, or internal fires triggered by the penetrating round. The inability to recover or recycle Panther components compounded Germany's armored attrition rate, turning each loss into a permanent reduction in fighting capability. For surviving Panther crews, the emotional toll was immense. Many of these men had spent years fighting inside the same vehicle, learning its personality, quirks, and vulnerabilities. They had grown attached not only to the machine, but to the sense of security it once provided. To see that security erased so suddenly and so violently left lasting psychological scars. Crews wrote in diaries about the fear they felt whenever they heard the distinct crack of an incoming high-velocity shot, knowing that their armor could no longer protect them. Veterans who had survived countless engagements before 1945 now found that each new mission felt more dangerous than the last, regardless of their tactical experience. As the Allies pushed deeper into Germany, they encountered abandoned Panther assembly plants, some of which held nearly finished hulls awaiting final construction. Allied engineers often inspected these plants to understand German manufacturing techniques. They found evidence of hurried work, material substitutions, and incomplete armor plating, signs of the industrial collapse that had accompanied Germany's final months. These discoveries helped historians later understand that even without the improved shells, the Panther's effectiveness might have declined simply because Germany no longer had the capacity to produce tanks at the same level of quality as earlier in the war. In the broader context of armored warfare history, the aftermath of the improved shell's introduction represented a defining moment. For decades, the Panther had been admired by military scholars for its innovative design, powerful gun, and balanced performance. Yet its defeat revealed an essential truth. No tank is invincible, and technological innovation on one side inevitably triggers innovation on the other. The improved shell demonstrated that armor and firepower exist in constant tension, and advancements in ammunition could rapidly shift battlefield dynamics even late in a conflict. This lesson would resonate through post-war tank development, influencing generations of military engineers. Military analysts who reviewed the war in the years that followed often described the improved shell as a force multiplier, a relatively small technological advancement that produced disproportionately large effects. It did not require new vehicles, extensive training, or large-scale tactical overhauls. Instead, it improved the capabilities of existing weapons, enhancing penetration power and enabling Allied forces to neutralize German armor with greater efficiency. This cost-effective improvement exemplified how incremental innovation could transform the strategic landscape, especially when introduced at a moment of opportunity. The aftermath extended beyond the battlefield into political and civilian realms. As German cities fell to Allied forces, civilians often saw Panther wrecks scattered along roadsides, their charred forms symbolizing not only military defeat, but the collapse of the regime that had promised technological superiority. For many German citizens, the sight was jarring, a visual reminder that even their most advanced weapons could not withstand the relentless pressure of Allied advances. The wrecks became landmarks of defeat, silent but powerful markers of a war that was spiraling beyond recovery. In contrast, Allied civilians reading newspapers back home saw images of destroyed Panthers as signs of progress. Headlines celebrated the success of Allied tank crews and anti-tank gunners, sometimes exaggerating the technological details for dramatic effect. Although these reports often simplified the complexities of armored warfare, they contributed to a growing belief that victory was not just possible but imminent. Public morale improved as stories of Allied success circulated, reinforcing support for the war's final push and validating the sacrifices made by soldiers abroad. Among military scientists, the aftermath of the Panther's defeat sparked renewed interest in improving armor materials. If the improved shell could penetrate one of the best-designed tanks of the war, what would future conflicts require? Researchers began studying new alloys, sloping techniques, and composite layering long before these technologies became standard. This research would eventually lead to breakthroughs such as composite armor and reactive armor innovations that defined Cold War-era tank design. In many ways, the Panther's downfall became the catalyst for post-war armored innovation. The aftermath also influenced how nations approached the balance between offense and defense in armored vehicles. Before the improved shell, many believed that increasing armor thickness was the natural path forward. But the shell demonstrated that firepower could outpace armor more quickly than expected. This revelation shifted design philosophies across multiple countries, encouraging a more balanced approach that considered mobility, firepower, and survivability as interconnected priorities rather than elements to be maximized in isolation. Lessons learned from the Panther's defeat would echo in the designs of tanks like the American M48 Patton, the British Centurion, and later the German Leopard. In German post-war military analysis, veterans repeatedly emphasized the emotional aftermath of fighting in a tank that could no longer protect them. Several accounts described moments in which the crew heard the improved shell strike metal and felt an immediate, instinctive understanding that they had lost the battle before they even saw the flames. These stories carried a sense of tragic resignation, reflecting not only the end of a machine's dominance, but the end of an entire military doctrine rooted in armored superiority. The Panther's downfall became symbolic of Germany's broader defeat, a collapse not only of machinery but of belief. The final months of the war saw the Panther relegated to increasingly desperate roles. Some units used their remaining tanks as stationary bunkers, burying them partially underground to reduce their profile. Others abandoned damaged Panthers to reinforce barricades or block roads in urban fighting. These improvised solutions reflected the harsh reality. The Panther could no longer fulfill its intended role as a breakthrough and counterattack vehicle. Instead, it became a defensive asset of diminishing value, often destroyed before it could make a meaningful impact on the battlefield. For Allied tank crews, the aftermath brought its own challenges. Despite the improved shell's success, the war remained dangerous, and German forces still possessed weapons capable of inflicting severe casualties. Crews recognized that the improved shell was a tool, not a guarantee. They maintained strict discipline, continued training, and remained alert during every engagement. Their respect for the Panther, even in its diminished state, prevented overconfidence and ensured that they approached each battle with the caution required to survive. One of the most significant consequences of the Panther's downfall was the accelerated collapse of German defensive networks. The Panther had served as the cornerstone of numerous defensive strategies, anchoring strongpoints and providing mobile firepower to repel Allied advances. Without it, German units found it increasingly difficult to coordinate effective resistance. Infantry units lacked the fire support needed to repel attacks. Artillery units faced constant risk of encirclement, and field headquarters lost their primary means of countering Allied armored thrusts. The improved shell's introduction hastened this collapse by neutralizing the Panther's ability to stabilize German defenses. The cumulative effect of these factors became evident during the encirclement of the Ruhr pocket. German forces trapped in the region found themselves unable to break out, in part because their remaining Panther units were quickly destroyed by Allied gunners equipped with improved ammunition. Deprived of armored mobility, the encircled units could not mount meaningful resistance or exploit weak points in the Allied encirclement. The fall of the Ruhr pocket marked a major strategic defeat for Germany, and the diminished effectiveness of the Panther played a central role in that outcome. As the end of the war approached, Panther crews who survived often abandoned their tanks before final engagements, choosing instead to surrender or retreat on foot. Many felt that remaining in their tanks was a death sentence. This behavior reflected the ultimate aftermath of the improved shell, the total erosion of trust between crew and machine. The Panther was no longer seen as a weapon of war, but as a liability one that could ignite without warning and trap its crew inside a burning steel coffin. Historians later reflected on how astonishingly fast the Panther's reputation had changed. In 1943 and 1944, it was considered one of the most formidable tanks ever produced, capable of dominating battlefields across Europe. By mid-1945, it had become a symbol of German decline, unable to stand against the technological innovations of its adversaries. This reversal underscored the fragility of battlefield supremacy, revealing how quickly technological advantages could shift in the face of new developments. In the immediate post-war years, Allied investigators examined the ruins of countless Panthers in an effort to understand of the improved shell's impact. They found consistent patterns of penetration, frontal hits at angles previously believed impossible, deep internal damage caused by spalling and secondary explosions, and extensive fires triggered by ignited fuel and ammunition. These findings confirmed that the improved shell had not merely compensated for previous deficiencies, it had fundamentally altered the balance of armored warfare. The aftermath also influenced the training and doctrine of post-war militaries. Armies around the world recognized that technological innovation had become a decisive factor in modern warfare. They established research institutions dedicated to improving ammunition design, armor composition, and vehicle survivability. These institutions drew directly from the lessons of the Panther's downfall, using the war as a case study in how rapidly a battlefield advantage could disappear in the face of superior engineering. Among German military analysts, a recurring theme emerged: the belief that the Panther's defeat was not simply the result of a superior shell, but of Germany's inability to adapt quickly enough. While the improved shell exposed vulnerabilities, the German war machine had lacked the industrial flexibility, resources, and time needed to respond effectively. This interpretation placed the Panther's downfall within a broader narrative of logistical collapse, a reminder that technological innovation must be supported by sustainable production and strategic foresight. Yet for many who lived through the war, the aftermath of the improved shell was defined not by strategic analysis, but by personal experience. Survivors remembered the heat, the smoke, the chaos, and the sudden loss of comrades. They recalled the sound of the shell striking steel, the moments of confusion as systems failed, and the desperate attempts to escape burning interiors. These human stories added emotional depth to the Panther's demise, illustrating that the technical defeat of a tank also represented the suffering of the men inside it. As German forces surrendered in May 1945, Panther wrecks remained scattered across Europe like broken monuments of a lost cause. Many were dragged away for scrap in the years after the war, melted down and repurposed for civilian reconstruction. Others were preserved in museums, serving as reminders of the tank's dual legacy, both a masterpiece of engineering and a symbol of technological defeat. Visitors who toured these exhibits often marveled at the tank's impressive design, unaware that it had ultimately been undone by a shell no larger than a human forearm. In the end, the aftermath of the improved shell's introduction revealed the complex interplay between technology, strategy, morale, and human resilience. The shell had not merely damaged German tanks, it had reshaped the final phase of the war, undermined German confidence, and empowered Allied forces to push forward with unprecedented momentum. Its impact extended beyond the battlefield into the realms of industry, politics, and psychology, demonstrating that even a seemingly small innovation could influence the course of history. By the time the war ended, the Panther's transformation into a burning metal coffin was not merely a battlefield observation, but a historical metaphor. It represented the collapse of German armored doctrine, the exhaustion of its industrial might, and the triumph of Allied adaptation. And although the Panther remains admired by historians and enthusiasts today, its defeat stands as a testament to the truth that no machine, no matter how advanced, is immune to the relentless evolution of warfare. In the end, the story of the Panther's downfall is not simply a tale of machines meeting on the battlefield. It is a testament to how quickly innovation can rewrite the rules of war. The Panther entered World War II as one of the most feared tanks ever built, a design that seemed to defy the weapons of its time. Yet, within months, a single advancement in ammunition, an improved shell shaped by necessity and refined by relentless experimentation, reduced that reputation to ashes. The improved shell did not just pierce armor. It pierced the confidence of crews, the assumptions of commanders, and the once unshakable belief that German engineering could outmatch any opponent. Its arrival marked the moment when the balance shifted permanently, signaling the beginning of the end for Germany's armored might. Looking back, the Panther's transformation into what many crews called a burning metal coffin reflects a broader truth about warfare. Superiority is temporary, and technological dominance can evaporate the moment an adversary finds a way to counter it. The Allies did not defeat the Panther solely through numbers or brute force. They defeated it by refusing to accept limitations, by pushing science forward, and by trusting that knowledge, persistence, and innovation could turn the tide of a global conflict. The fall of the Panther is therefore more than a historical footnote. It is a reminder that every weapon has an expiration date, and that the outcome of war is shaped as much by adaptation as by strength. If you've enjoyed exploring this dramatic chapter of World War II, one filled with engineering triumphs, battlefield turning points, and the human stories behind machines, then stay with us. There are countless more hidden moments, forgotten innovations, and untold battles waiting to be uncovered. And if this story left you curious for more, make sure you don't miss what comes next. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible war histories, battlefield breakdowns, and documentaries just like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.